My dad was a big tomato farmer, and we lived outside of a town called Stockton, California, in a farm. And he raised tomatoes, and I was going to grade school in a small community. And then all of a sudden, we got news, Pearl Harbor. And my parents come from Japan, so my dad was devastated. He was here when he was 15 years old, so this is the only country he knew. But he was a Japanese citizen, and my mother also was. And anyhow, what happened was Pearl Harbor happened, and that happened December 7th, 1941. And by the end of spring in 1942, we have got notice in the newspaper and radio that all you Japanese nationality people, whether you were born here or come from Japan, report to the San Joaquin County Fairground and bring only what you can carry. Well, about that time, my father said, I think they're going to put us in a prison or somewhere, but what do we do? So he tried to get rid of some of the farm equipment, being a tomato farmer. He got rid of part of it, but in the building behind their house where the workmen stayed, he put all the personal stuff and locked it up. And then our neighbor, who was a Caucasian, took us to the San Joaquin County Fairgrounds. Army truck waited, and we loaded on the Army truck, and they took us to Gila River Indian Reservation, where the Army built them barracks, looked like Army barracks, but they were hastily built, so they, all had to live there. Whatever your business or whatever you did for a living in the world or in the town, why that's what they had you do in the internment camp. And if you were a doctor, well, they had a hastily built, it was a nice hospital-like thing. If you were a nurse, you worked in the hospital. If you were a farmer, you went out there and started a tomato farm. If you owned a restaurant or a cook, you worked in a mess hall. And the barracks were, I think there were, if I remember correctly, there were probably each block, they call it, had, I'm going to say, 5 or 6 buildings on each side, and in between they had the men's bathroom and the women's bathroom and the utility room, and so that's where we stayed there. My dad being a farmer, but I think he wanted to try something different. He became a cook in the block 5. We were put in the block 3, and then block 4 was an empty lot. Block 5 was another set of barracks. My dad was a cook there. And so we kind of enjoyed it as a 14-year-old because we had a lot of playmates. But my parents, surprisingly enough, I'd say my parents took it well after I got out of the sophomore year. But in the meantime, the U.S. Army said, anytime you want to leave this internment camp, we'll give you a train ticket to wherever you want to go, and $50. Well, $50 at that time was a lot more money than it is now. See? So my next sister, as soon as she graduated high school in internment camp, her and her girlfriend moved to Cleveland, Ohio, and the people chose Detroit, Michigan, Cleveland, Chicago, Minneapolis. The war was still going on, so they had industry there, see. And that's where they moved in there so they could find jobs. Well, both my sisters ended up in Cleveland, and they were pretty well educated, so they got jobs, and each one of them got a different job, different hospital. They worked in the office. Then when I decided I wanted to move to Cleveland, because my sisters were there, I had just gotten out of the sophomore year, and my friend and I, we went to the government office or whatever, and got us 2 train tickets to go all the way to Cleveland, Ohio, and then they gave us $50 a piece, So we went to we got to Chicago, then we had to catch a train to go into Cleveland, And then I got enrolled in Cleveland High School, Heights High. My sister got me enrolled there, and I stayed with a wealthy, elderly lady who her husband had deceased, and she owned a business called Hazard's Canning Company, I think. I was a houseboy there, I mean, I hated it, but then it was living. I had to wash dishes and help clean the house, and Saturday morning get in the Cadillac with her and go to the grocery store and just help her shop, I did that for a year, and I told my sister, I said, you got to move me out a little bit. I said, I'm not real crazy about staying there, and she got me a place in another Cleveland Heights home. It was a mid-aged couple, and he was not the editor, but he worked for the Cleveland paper, and they treated me like a son. My folks wanted me to go to college, so they said, well, the scholastic standard in this all-boys Catholic high school is a little bit better, so we want you to go there. So she pulled some strings, because she worked in a Catholic hospital, and had me enrolled in the Catholic all-boys school. And the father, every morning we had a 1-hour religion, and the father used to say, Ken Hirata, have you ever thought about converting to a Catholic, I said, well, I haven't thought about it, Father. But every 3 weeks, 4 weeks, he'd ask me in class. And so finally, and at that time I remember Catholics could not eat meat on Friday, right? And getting divorced and being a father and getting divorced was a no-no, So one day, the father asked me, he said, Ken Hirata, have you decided when you want to convert to Catholic? I said, I have one question, Father. He said, yes. I said, is it better to be a non-Catholic than a bad Catholic? Well, the whole classroom went on an uproar, clapped hands and everything, but anyhow, so he never asked me again. Going to high school, I turned 18 when I was a senior. My birthday is on January 29th, so I turned 18 as a senior, and in February, I got a draft notice. The war was still going on. I got a draft notice, and I went to the draft board, and I said, in a couple more months, I'm going to get a diploma, graduation diploma. If you defer me till then, I will go into service. So they deferred me, and so I thought, wow. Then they quit drafting. So I thought I dodged a bullet. Well, in 1950, when the Korean War broke out in July, by September, late September, I was already in the service. See? So they must have had me on top of the list. When I got my draft notice, I was going with my wife for a couple of years, and I said, I understand that if you're a married soldier, you get wife gets a allotment check. They said, yeah. I said, want to get married? She said, okay. So got married that quick. In fact, now her and I, this October, we'll be married 70 years. I got put into an engineer maintenance group. That's where they repair small stuff, diesel generators. I said, well, this isn't bad. I'm not in combat. Well, we're in the back line, and we had to repair whatever the infantry had, maybe a generator, maybe a truck, maybe whatever. Anyhow, another thing was, when a dozer or some of the equipment got hit on the front line, they had to have somebody go and either try and fix it there or bring it back, And I was fortunate. I went there as a private E1. 30 days later, I got promoted to PFC. And then 30 days later, I got promoted to corporal. And 30 days later, I got reported to staff sergeant. So I thought, well, I must be doing something right, Anyhow, so that was great for me because I got raised in pay, and I didn't have to do guard duty, see. Even as a corporal, I had to pull the guard duty. And I hated that. In the midnight walk around, I mean, you're always alert. Hear funny noise or dog bark, and God, you wonder what's going on. But when you become a sergeant, you don't have to do guard duties. I like that. One of the funny things that happened when I was in Korea was, excuse me, being in the maintenance group, and our headquarters was back from the front line naturally, because we had equipment there, right? So we got this Jeep and this 4x go out. And so lunchtime, sometimes we're that too far to go back to our camp, so we had to stop at some infantry camp or whatever and go and ask the permission from the CEO if we could have lunch there. It'd be, they were a little behind the front line, and they had their camps, and so we used to go and have to ask if we could eat there. Well, in Korea, they had what they call a shower point along the river. To be accompanied with, and they had water coming from the river, and it instantly heated up, and you got to take a shower. The only thing that they don't give you is your hat. They give you shorts, shirt, pants, jacket, whatever. So you never wore your rank on your sleeve like they do. You put it on your front of the hat. And we stopped to eat at a place, and I had asked the CEO, "Can we have lunch here with you people?" They said, "Yeah, help us. I'll get in line." So we take our cap off, put it in the backpack. We got in line, and then they had the mess line, and held the mess gear out. Some guy that's serving food looked at me and said, "Hey," he said, "get in the back of the line, you gook." This PFC behind me pulls out my cap and says, grabbed this guy by the collar. He says, "Do you know who you're talking to? You're talking to a sergeant." The guy said, "Oh my God." That was the only incident we had, Other than that, everybody respected me. They knew I was of Japanese ancestor or nationality, but everything went fine. I came out of the service, and I got a job, and this in the body shop. And the assistant or the general manager of the body shop was a Japanese American guy. So he hired me, and he hired another friend of mine who was born in the United States. And being that I used to fool around with cars, why, he started us out as beginners, and at the end of the week, he gave me a raise. At the end of the first week, he said, "God, you're better than I thought you'd be." Eventually, what they did, the government did, was I think the government did everybody, just had to be, what did he say, 20 years later, when the government gave everybody that was interned, even if you was a baby, $20,000. Well, $20,000 helped me and her a lot. But $20,000 for my father when he lost the farm did nothing. But anyhow, there was no rioting, no sabotage. But when the people from the Japanese American people, they went to Washington trying to get us that money, the government naturally didn't want to spend that kind of money because there's a lot of money. And they were saying, well, we're trying to protect you people, put you in internment camp. Well, one argument was, well, then how come that internment camp had barbed wire fence, and the guard on the thing had the machine gun pointing inward instead of outward? That really held a lot of water as far as the argument, If they're going to protect us, shoot anybody that wants to come in, but don't point the machine guns at the inside. The honor flight was partly Korean, partly U.S. World War II people, and a very few Vietnam people. See, mostly Korean people. And I looked at it and I said, wow, that's part of us, part of me. It's the people, the general public. They impressed me more than wherever you went, there was a crowd of people. They clapping and for more than the honor flight itself. You see a monument, You see a statue and all that. But plus, I guess being the Japanese American, when they had all the gathering of and they lined them up on the chairs, they had three of us on the front by themselves, three chairs, and I was one of them that and made me feel very good. I learned a lot. Learned a lot.
What's the most important thing you learned?
Well, respect other people. Respect other people. They're there just like we were. When I took basic training, there was a African American there, and then there was a couple people from the hills. We call them the hills, and I felt like I'm pretty much educated, but those people are there, and they're people just like us. And so you just can't say, some people call those guys, you hillbillies. I don't care. They come from the South, call them whatever you want to, but they're people just like me. They respected me,